For those that are attendees, we will record this and we will post it online as soon as we can get it downloaded and uploaded to the webpage. And so if there's friends of yours or counterparts that you want to share this information with, feel free to direct them to the website to observe what occurs tonight. We certainly encourage that. All right, looks like we have 11 folks that have logged on as of now. We have a total of 15 people in attendance, 4 panelists and 11 attendees. My name is Matt Lafferty. I'm the principal planner with Larimer County Planning Department. I do long-range planning along with Jen Cram. She's helps me with some of the long-range planning stuff, and Leslie Ellis, who's also on, helps a lot with this, and I'll let them introduce themselves and role they play around here real briefly. Just for tonight's proceedings, we are talking about farm stands tonight and how farm stands occur in the county, or we currently allow them, and how we think that they might be expanded to provide greater opportunity for property owners to operate them and to put some limit on some regulations to make sure that they're safe and adequate for people to utilize them. So we'll be talking about that tonight. That's the main thrust of the subject matter. Typically how these meetings work is we're going to have a presentation from our consultant, Austin Flanagan. And after Austin is done making a presentation and there's some introductory comments, we will then allow the participants, you folks, the attendees, to raise your hand by going to the bottom of your screen and selecting the raise hand button. And when you raise your hand, it lets me know who came up first. I will then unmute you and you will be given 3 minutes to provide any feedback that you want to do. You can give us general comments that you like it or you don't like something, or you can be really specific and provide us with some suggested changes that maybe will help us to further refine the regulations as we put them together. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and let the other panelists introduce themselves. I'm gonna start with Leslie Ellis.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Leslie Ellis. I'm the Community Development Director and mostly just here to listen to the presentation and see your comments. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Leslie. Jen, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Sure. As Matt noted, I'm Jen Cram, Planner 2 with Larimer County. And so I am assisting Matt with long range planning, and I also do current development review.
Very good. Thank you, Jen. And Austin, I'm going to turn the entire floor over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself and start your presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. My name is Austin Flanagan. I'm with Clarion Associates. We're a part of the consulting team helping get this land use code rewritten and then adopted. So we're on phase 2 here. Let me just figure out how to do this. My multitasking skills. Okay, here we go. So as Matt noted, we're going to be talking just about farm stands tonight, but I wanted to give you a quick lay of the land as far as public meetings are concerned. So maybe some of you joined us for our last ag open meeting for phase 2. That was a general overview of all of the phase 2 issues for agriculture that we're considering. Tonight, we're talking about farm stands. Next up will be the keeping of livestock and processing. That open house is on July 13th. The public draft for phase 2 for all the agricultural related regulations will be released July 28th. And then you'll see we're following that up with a couple more open houses and joint work sessions with the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. I'll end the presentation with this slide as well, but just wanted to give you a quick lay of the land now. And those issues that we're discussing for phase 2 are these 3. It's generally urban agriculture, farm stands, and livestock. So let's jump right into it. The phase 2 approach, I won't spend too much time on this slide other than saying the phase 2 approach, we're really just looking at the uses. And tonight, we're going to be primarily talking about the use allowances and the use standards. So we'll be asking 2 questions. Should additional agricultural uses be allowed in more districts? And should use-specific standards be tailored for certain agricultural uses based on perceived impacts? So let's jump right in. These are the accessory use tables adopted as a part of phase 1, highlighting farm stands here so you guys can see the current allowances as adopted in December as a part of that phase 1 draft. Now, I just want to show you this to show you how the draft regulations are set up today, to note that there's a whole lot more agricultural related accessory uses than there used to be, and to note that the farm stand allowances are going to be shifting quite a bit, and they're going to be made quite a bit more lenient. So that's what they are today. Moving forward, so one of the things that we're doing here is realigning the code with a recent state law, and that state law requires localities to permit farm stands on any size parcel, regardless of whether the site has been zoned for agricultural operations. And that's just generally what the bill does. But I should be very clear in saying that the bill specifically notes that local governments are still allowed to regulate the use of farm stands, especially when it has concerns with the safety and welfare of the farm stand operations. So to align the LUC with the House bill, we're going to propose to allow farm stands as permitted accessory uses in every single district and remove the lot size requirement. So that change will mean, if I can just go back, that you'll see ACs in each one of these cells. So it will be a permitted accessory use in each one of these districts, in every district. And with that realignment.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Oh, please.
So can you explain for them that the accessory function, that it should be an accessory to an existing operation?
Right.
Well, it's allowed in a district, it has to be accessory to a farm.
Right, that's exactly right. So it's got to be the accessory use and not the principal use of the land. And we should note that in many ways, Larimer County's approach to farm stands is much more lenient than the state law. The state law actually just has to do with folks that are growing food on their land and selling it on their land. Larimer County allows for even a broader regulation of farm stands. So just to flesh that out a little bit, instead of requiring that the farm stand, all of the material, all of the products sold at the farm stand be on that actual lot, we broaden that out in Larimer County to allow it to be anywhere in the county. Those goods can be sourced anywhere in the county. So that's this first regulation you'll see here, this first standard. And these have been adjusted slightly to account for that House bill. And so I want to take a minute here to show you these 4 use-specific standards that apply to farm stands. So again, the first is just that the majority of the products be sourced from Larimer County agricultural operations. Again, that's much more broader, that's much more lenient than the House bill. That the food items meet the public health requirements, that the farm stand itself comply with the dimensional standards in the applicable zoning district. And then lastly, that if the farm stand's designed for public entry, that it meet building code requirements and it get a building permit. So that's where things stand now. And let's talk about where we think we're going. And so what we're getting at here with these proposed modifications is the safety of farm stand operations. So it's to ensure that there aren't any accidents, that we're really thinking ahead of these types of operations and doing so to promote the welfare of all of those in the county and all of those who may use these farm stands. So what we're proposing is 1 parking space be required plus 1 space per 200 square feet of gross retail space. And that be provided on the lot, which the farm stand is located and in close proximity to the farm stand. And that requirement can be fulfilled with paved or unpaved spaces. And one thing I'll note there is that all parking cannot be any parking requirement can't be met with parking in the right of way. That can't be the designated parking spaces provided. So just to note that that's true of any parking in the county. And then the last bit of this is that there's a bit of leeway, there's a bit of flexibility baked into this proposed standard, and that the community development director may waive or modify this requirement upon a showing by the applicant that the safety of the farm stand operations can be sufficiently accounted for in an alternative manner. So again, what we're trying to do here is promote the safety of these operations, to try to be thinking through these things before they become an issue. And so that's our proposed language, and I can come back to this, but I do want to end really quickly just to say that this is sort of, the second cut at this discussion at farm stands. We talked about it once in the beginning of June, and we'll come back to talk about these issues throughout the process. And you guys will have the public draft in front of you in about a month. So with that being said, maybe I'll turn it back over to Matt and see if he wants to add anything, if I missed anything. And if not, I might stop sharing so we can see each other.
That's great. Please feel free to stop sharing. I think that what we want to emphasize here in with those parking spaces is it sounds kind of odd, but we currently in Larimer County don't allow any a use, whether it's a single family dwelling all the way up to an industrial operation, is required to have their required parking on lot. And so we're trying to keep the parking standard minimal here to provide an opportunity for a customer to pull off the road, come in, get some product from you, and then move on, and not to have the parking standard too high. We don't think that it needs to be paved or any of those types of things, but we want to make sure from a safety standpoint that we're not commingling pedestrians with vehicular traffic and those types of things. And so our current standard is no parking in the right of way. That's not to say that we can't talk to our engineering department and others to determine if that standard should continue. I know that out in some of the rural sections of the county, and even in parts of some of the urban sections of the county, there are very wide spots in the road, and maybe those are opportunities that we can use as alternate designs. But for this discussion, we've couched it that parking should occur on the site and not in the public right of way, and then we can investigate that a little bit further. And so we want to hear from you, what are some of the other issues? Are there any other issues with this? We want to make sure that we don't get overly bureaucratic with these things. Currently, building codes require that when you allow customers to enter a building, that you have to meet certain building code standards. And so designing a farm stand such that the flaps can open up and product to be sold without customers coming in, probably if it's 200 square feet or less, doesn't require a permit. But if you go over 200 square feet, a permit's required for the building safety, as well as if you allow public to enter. So with that being said, we want to hear from you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask that at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand button. If you want to interject and add something to this conversation, feel free. We're here to listen to you and take your input. Just hit that button and I will open it up for conversation. Each person will get at least 3 minutes. We got 12 people online. Right now, I'm thinking as long as we don't get out of control and we try to be reasonable, I'll let it go up to 5 minutes.
Matt,
Anybody?
I'd like to add one other point of clarification is that, it's really our goal with allowing farm stands as an accessory use in all land use districts and having the standards up front that if you have a farm stand that meets those standards, you don't have to come to the county and go through any type of process. It's just something that's allowed. So we're trying to save, time and money to allow these to happen in more places. But we are looking out for the health and safety of the public that is shopping at these farm stands.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, it's open for anybody to raise their hand and share with us their thoughts. I see some names on there that I know some people want to make some comments, so hopefully we get somebody to make a comment or two. I'm not seeing anybody. There we go. Daniel. I don't want to brutalize your name, so Daniel, you are.
I appreciate that, Matthew. It's Waldvogel. I'm the director of external affairs for the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, and we have a proud chapter, the Larimer County Farmers Alliance, in Larimer County. I think at the last count, I think we were at about 160 active members in the county, and Thanks for the time today. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Austin. Also, Leslie, I don't see you on there anymore, but thank you to everyone for joining. And oh, there you are. Good to see you. And appreciate the conversation tonight. And it does sound like y'all are really trying to work towards finding striking a balance to making this work. Just a couple questions. As far as, I've heard two different figures as I've started to dive into this a little bit, between 200 square feet and 100 square feet for an accessory dwelling unit. And from what I understand somewhat, that has some, is there a determination based on allowable entry? And then kind of what constitutes entry? If someone's walking under an eave or actually entering a door to grab something, kind of what standards are we at? Also, what kind of constitutes, it sounds like you're being pretty flexible as far as a parking spot not requiring pavement, but are there any other safety requirements as far as signage or, sometimes from what I've understood, sometimes there's some requirements for, having a material, an aggregate that doesn't require too much, as far as dust blowing or particulates, things like that. So are there any other additional standards there? And then are there any other limits as far as how many vehicles can come and go in a day? I think those might be our three questions from Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. But once again, just thank you for being on today and offering this, and looking forward to cooperating more to see how we can come to a solution and strike a balance here.
Very good. Thanks for those comments, and feel free to stay on for a few moments. The 200 and the 100, it used to be that Larimer County said you couldn't, if you had a building 120 square feet or less, it didn't require a permit. We moved that number to 200. So if I put an accessory building on my property that's 200 square feet or less, it doesn't require a building permit unless I allow occupancy of that by the public. The minute you invite the public inside the building code safety requirements kick in, and that's where a building permit comes in to make sure that it's properly constructed and people have good ingress egress in case of emergency. And on some of these small buildings, that doesn't sound like much. So we'll see where that goes. So anything over 200 square feet. And we're really not trying to get too heavy-handed with things like signage. I think that was a good point, though, that there might be needs for signage or dust control measures. But I'm thinking that for most farm stands, that are open on a daily basis or a weekly basis, the amount of traffic that's going to come in today is going to probably be fairly intermittent. People come, people go, people come, and we're hoping that one space per 200 square feet, which is a typical retail type calculation for parking, will provide adequate space for somebody to come in, get their product and move on fairly quickly without encumbering the public right of way or having to find alternate places to park. But certainly we think that if we can adopt standards like that without having to do administrative reviews or anything like that, everybody can function on that basis. We can keep this at a building permit level and not go too heavy-handed on having to go through a process or justify anything like that. So those are great comments, and we appreciate your input on that.
To answer one additional question that Daniel had with regard to what constitute entry. So it wouldn't be walking under an eave, but walking through a doorway. So when you enter the building, that would be considered entry. So if a farm stand wanted to have signage, they would just have to apply for a separate building permit and meet the sign code requirements for that zone district. And then I think we addressed all of your questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. So just trying to drill down to what maybe can forecast for a cost. Do you have any information as far as what average average cost for a building permit might be, or if you were going to ask for a administrative review or variance, like what that might run an operation. And then also being that this is a fairly new bill, but also back to 2019, I think is when it passed. So is there any idea for, some level of grandfathering if folks are already operating a current farm stand? Is there a way that, certainly a building permit, you usually apply for that before you build the building. So is there a process for those that may have already been operating for the last couple of years?
Sure, if somebody's grandfathered in, they're grandfathered in. There's no reason to go back on that unless it was a building that required a permit and they just didn't get it. Then we would certainly want to bring them up to speed on that. Building permits are valued based upon the cost of construction. So we can't predict that. So if you build a building that costs $500,000 to build, then you're going to pay the building permit fee based upon a share of that cost. And so the cheaper the buildings, and these are probably relatively small shed-like buildings, I'm going to assume. And so I would hope that the building permit fees are relatively low. What we're trying to do right now is to not become a bureaucratic agency in this situation and try to keep this as an accessory building that doesn't require any kind of application process with the county. Therefore, we wouldn't have to charge a fee to get one approved. However, if we adopt rules and nobody tends to follow the rules, and that's usually where a process gets adopted, and then we start looking at them, and that's where a fee would apply. But even our administrative fees are relatively low. And when I say relatively low, they're within the several $100 range, $500, something like that, to $1,000. And so, we're trying to keep this at a level where people don't have to come in and seek a bunch of approvals and pay a bunch of fees, because we don't want to add that burden onto those uses at this time.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like it's proportional to, the potential cost of construction based on the building. And then if somebody set up a farm stand prior to the recent changes that was less than 120 square feet, they could potentially be grandfathered to be operating. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that's all of my questions tonight. I appreciate all of your time.
Okay, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Tanya, you are free to unmute and speak.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, and it's good to see you all again.
Yes, ma'am, you as well.
So I had a question about, I understand that it used to be 120 square feet, now it's 200 square feet for a permanent structure. Do these requirements for permitting go for a temporary structure like an easy up tent like people would use at the farmer's market in town, or?
Not normally, not if they're kept under a certain level. The only time that I've ever seen tents get permitted was when they're more like tents that you would see in a wedding or something. They're relatively big and you got tables scattered around and there's ingress, egress issues. But for the most part, you want to put a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 20 pop-up tent that, or shelter that can protect your product. That's fine. We're not going to get into regulating that through building permitting.
And we want to encourage people to be creative. We received a call for the Planner on Call, and somebody wanted to use a vintage truck that they would have the products in the back of the truck that people could just walk up and shop. So, that counts as well, and no building permit would be required.
And it's acceptable for people to walk under a tent, like a 10 by 10 easy up. It's acceptable for people to walk around under that without a permit.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Anything else, Tanya?
That's all I can think of. Thank you.
Again, thanks for joining us. Katie, you just turned off. Did you want to talk? Katie, you're free to talk now.
Sorry, I was panicking because I couldn't see an unmute button and then all of a sudden one appeared. So there you go. I'm kind of joining the conversation late, unfortunately, but I read in an email this morning about the number of people that were allowed to attend the farm stand each day. It said that there was only like 10 people or 10 vehicles that could come through to your farm stand. I was wondering if that was the case. You guys didn't address it in your parking presentation and building presentation. So I was just wondering if that was a true statement or not.
I believe you might be confused with another section of our land use code related to home occupations and the number of vehicle trips. The farm stand policy does not have any associated vehicle trips. So again, we're hoping that, people visiting the farm stand, they'll come and go, and that, we're really looking to all of you to say, what the appropriate number of parking spaces is. If you have a busy farm stand, you might want to provide more if it's just occasional. But again, we're not trying to be heavy-handed.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I just, like I said, I read that and panicked a little bit. And so it's good to know that there isn't a limit. So that was my main question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see that was also a question that Ms. Ramey provided us as well. So hopefully that answered your question out there, Kristen. All right, well, that was the 3 people that raised their hand. Brett is now asking to speak. Brett, feel free to share your thoughts with us.
Hey there. Yeah, this is for Brett and I are business partners here at Owl Tree Farm. Yeah, I have a couple questions. Partly, I'm just curious as to why you guys don't just sort of make your policies in line, basically cut and paste, save a lot of time and money from what the Colorado Farm Bill that came into effect last year, what that says regarding, farm stands, as far as like any zone is acceptable for a farm stand, as long as, you're in line with county health regulations, things like that. And, a few other issues regarding Farming and Cottage Use Act, especially, and also the National Cottage Foods Act. I'm just curious as to why you guys don't essentially just look at that and apply it here so that everybody can be on the same page and we can have a better system in place as far as small farms go.
Well, I think that we're trying to, Brett, stay in line with that as much as possible. The Farm Bill, when it passed, said, really what it said is you need to allow them and you need to accommodate for them in your community. But the Farm Bill recognizes, just like most state laws do, is that local agencies such as the county or the cities or whatnot often will adopt some supplementary rules based upon their idea of needs, based upon health, safety, welfare issues. And so we think that a couple of the issues that we're concerned with, primarily with parking in the right of way and some of those things, are some of those issues that we want to see resolved in order to make sure that these are successful and safe. And we want to do it as best we can in a way that doesn't too heavily impose upon the property owner. So, that's kind of where we're going with that. It's not to say that we want to regulate it any more than we have to, but those are some of the things that we felt were important, and that's why we're discussing them with you tonight.
And to add to that, our current regulation is actually more flexible in some ways than what the state says, as far as allowing the sale of agricultural products not grown on that property. If you look at the Senate bill, they specifically say that a farm stand should only sell products grown on that property. So we tried to be inclusive and to encourage, a greater, market for Larimer County agricultural products. And then we're really just focusing on the safety aspect with trying to initiate minimal parking standards. Otherwise, what we've proposed aligns very well with what the state standards say.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I guess I haven't seen exactly what the proposals say so far and stuff like that. But yeah, I would just like to voice my opinion that I feel like the regulation should be very liberal as far as who's allowed to have a farm stand, which zone you're in, things like that. I think health and safety is one thing, but having a robust and prolific local farm community, that's hugely important, I feel like, in this day and age. So yeah, I think that's.
And Bert, I think you're on target there, and that's good. We don't want to interfere with that. I think that the issue is sometimes for us is that traditional agriculture is moving away from a very rural environment where you got your large agricultural operators and stuff like that. And we're getting into this more urban type setting. And when you move farming operation into an urban type setting, it invites the potential for compatibility or conflict issues, not in a bad way, but it just invites those issues to come to the surface. And what we're trying to do is minimize the issues and make sure that that there's a way for these to operate in our community without being a nuisance or somebody complaining about them, so that you guys can continue to do the great work that you do.
Right. So are you guys considering any sort of framework as far as like a neighbor to neighbor mediation sort of thing? So it's like, okay, well, we have these really relaxed regulations, but if somebody does complain, we'll work with those neighbors to resolve the issues person to person or neighbor to neighbor, rather than saying, well, now we have to have stricter regulations across the board. Is that something anything that's going to be kind of coming into play at all?
Sure. Well, what we're really trying to do right now is just set the bar relatively low, such that we have what we think are adequate standards, and then hopefully there's not compatibility issues. I think that when it comes to farm stands, that's the way we're talking. There's going to be some other issues. I know that maybe you'll come on to the next meeting when we talk about how do you have livestock or animals on a property in an urban type setting and make it compatible. And I think that maybe there might be more inherent compatibility issues with those topics. And it may be that in those cases that we do exactly what you're saying, is saying, hey, let's find solutions before we find problems.
Okay. Cool. Well, unless my business partner has anything more to say, I think that's all I had for the moment. So I think we're good.
Brett, thanks for your comments.
Yeah, thank you.
Just because we have plenty of time, we're going to allow, I'm going to go to Ben and then I'll come back to you, Tanya, because we really want to stick to letting everybody have a chance to talk first. So Ben, you're free to speak.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yes.
All right, thanks again for hosting this. Appreciate the outreach on your part, and glad we can get a couple farmers in the room. So just a couple questions here. One's an observation and two are questions. The observation I had is, Matt, you said the perception that agriculture is moving in from the rural sector to the urban sector. And there's a lot of historic farms that have been here long before development occurred. So I would just challenge that framework a little bit in terms of, you have historic farm properties that have been here for a long time, that have development springing up around them. And it kind of flips the lens a little bit depending which side you're viewing it through. So I just want to acknowledge that you're viewing it through the lens of agriculture encroaching on urban versus perhaps urban encroaching on agriculture. And I know for our part, we feel the latter in that our farm has been here as a parcel for a long time. So then my two questions that I had were mostly clarifications. One was clarifying, Austin, during your presentation, you said that, correct me if I'm wrong here, just brief notes, but that farm stands would be allowed on a property if the principal use of that property was in agriculture. Was that correct?
No, so I may have misspoken. And that's what the state bill denotes, that if you have a principal agricultural use, then you gotta allow the farm stand. We're broader than that in Larimer County. In Larimer County, farm stands will be allowed as an accessory use in every area of the county, no matter if it's directly correlated with a principal agricultural operation.
Okay, here's why I ask. The bill HB 1191 quotes the ability of a farm stand to be operated on a principal use site of any size land area. So that's one issue, any size land area. And then the second one would be regardless of whether the site has been zoned by a local government for agricultural operations. So I
Right.
believe the state view would be regardless of whether you're principally operating as agriculture or not. And can you clarify the county's view in
So-
reference to that?
Right, yeah, thank you for that. So the county will be allowing farm stands in every single district as an accessory use, no matter what the correlated principal use is.
Okay, no matter what the correlated principal use. Okay.
But it would be accessory to an agricultural operation.
Right. So if I
So you're
was,
saying the primary
districts
principal
as
use would have to be an agricultural operation?
yes,
Yes.
Okay, so then in fact, the state law is a broader perspective in that regardless of zoning, and I quote again, regardless of whether the site has been zoned by a local government for agricultural operations. So the Larimer County law would be more restrictive, saying you must be an agricultural operation. Is that correct?
no,
Well, but then if you look at it, an agricultural operation is more broadly defined in our current code, and it is allowed in all land use districts. And so what we're saying is that you can have a farm stand that's accessory to that agricultural operation. We wouldn't want someone to just pop up a farm stand and start selling things if they didn't have an agricultural operation or a large garden or something.
Understood. So the
Ben,
reason, go ahead.
Ben, real quick. It reads, and I'm reading from the summary of the bill. The bill says that the retail sale of goods by or to the public by a farm stand must include goods or agricultural products that are grown or produced on the principal site.
Mhm.
So if I'm not an ag operation, I'm not a farming operation, and then I'm not producing anything on my site, then I'm not allowed to have a farm stand. However, if I'm a farm and I'm in the industrial zone district, which a farm is allowed in the industrial zone district, and I'm producing an agricultural product, I'm allowed to have a farm stand.
Gotcha. And
So
then
we're
to
directly in
clarify
line
further-
with what the state law says.
Okay, and then agriculture is allowed, to clarify, as a use by right on any zone?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, got it. And then as far as the principal use site, the scenario that I have in mind here is someone's at the end of a road. There's not a lot of traffic there as far as sales. They ask a neighbor up near the turnoff that has a lot more traffic, potential sales. Hey, can we put a farm stand up there? You've got more people, more visibility. The neighbor says yes up there. Would the neighbor need to be producing a portion of that produce sold at that farm stand?
They need to be an agricultural operation. They need to be a farm of sorts, yes.
Okay, and then farming is allowed on any site. So if that neighbor who was hosting the farm stand had some produce which was sold at the farm stand, then that would be acceptable?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then my second clarification was regarding the 10 visits. I'm relieved to hear you guys say that that is not in effect. So sorry, Katie, for sounding the alarm bells there. Can you clarify under what scenario there would be a limit on visitors to the place of business?
Those standards apply, Ben, for a home occupation, which is something different than a farm stand. So we're currently not proposing, there's nowhere in our code under the farm stand standards that limits the number of trips.
Okay, so if a home, excuse me if I get the wording wrong here, but a home side occupation, if they were to have an issue with the 10 visits, then in order to come into compliance, they would erect a farm stand to sell what they were growing. And instead of being a incidental, limited by visits, since agriculture is allowed in any zone, they're now in agriculture and they can put up a farm stand, and thus the visitor no longer
The
an
home
issue.
occupation is more for, let's say you're a hairstylist, and so you're gonna have a hair salon in your home, and so you're limited by the size of that business can have within the home and the number of trips. And so if you, again, a home occupation is something that's allowed by right, and as long as you meet the standards, you don't have to come through any land use process with us. So that, if you exceed that 10 trips because you have 20 clients a day, then you would not qualify as a home occupation, and you would need to move your business to a zone district where it's appropriate. So, the farm stand is an accessory use to an agricultural operations, and we are not limiting or restricting the number of trips per day.
So Ben,
Got it.
an example might be, if I was a llama farmer and I was raising llama as a livestock, and I took the fur from the llama and I treated it, and I either sold the fur as a finished product or I converted it to, let's say, blankets. Technically, that's an agricultural product that's produced on the site. From that, I can open up a farmstead and I can operate as a farmstead and sell my products from that site because that's an agricultural product. But if I was just producing a widget or a clock or iPods or something like that, those aren't agriculturally produced products on the site, and therefore those would have to fall under a home occupation standard and would have different criteria for how they're doing, because we don't want just everybody's house in all of Larimer County to be used as a retail operation.
Got it. Well, I owe you guys a thank you then for including agriculture as a use by right in all zonings, and that if anyone is having problems selling their agricultural wares, since they are allowed to do agriculture regardless of how they're zoned, they shouldn't, no agricultural producer from what I'm hearing should have an issue with the 10X customer limit.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Tanya, you can come back one time.
Thank you. And I appreciate Ben's point of agriculture coming in on homes coming in on traditional agricultural use. I have a small farm on a remnant of an 1874 homestead land grant farm with suburbia on my boundaries. So, and I'm zoned residential. However, it is primarily agricultural use. So I appreciate Ben's point there. I did have one question about clarification. My understanding of the farm stand, any property that maintains a primary agricultural use may include an accessory stand for the sale of agricultural products generally produced on the site. That makes sense. Or on another site operated by the owner of the facility. The question that I have is, if I sell honey at my farm stand that is produced in Larimer County, do I have to own the land on which that honey is produced somewhere else in Larimer County?
No.
Excellent. Thank you.
No, you could sell it at somebody else's farm stand. And I think the idea there was with the farm stands, what we do recognize is there are farmers out there that farm multiple parcels of land across the county regime. And so I may be a farmer that has a corner lot that I own and my house is on there and my barns are there. and all my equipment is there, but I really don't have a product that I'm producing from the site, we would still recognize that as being part of the person's farming operation and would be willing to consider that as part of their farm stand. So we could probably clarify that better in the code, and we'll take a quick look at that to make sure
Thank
that
you.
that's
I
clarified.
appreciate the clarification. That sounds very reasonable. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And back to Ben's comment, I didn't mean to imply that ag is encroaching on urban. I just think that there's more properties becoming urban properties being used for urban ag. So I do agree that a lot of what we do in the county as far as housing and whatnot encroaches upon ag, and ag should be protected from those uses. So
Add to that, Matt, in other areas of the land use code, we're really looking at, what use came first. And so the new use would be required to buffer or do other things. So we recognize, the changing landscape of things.
all right, Kristen, I was waiting for you to come on. How are you? Please join us. Then I lost her.
There she is.
Kristen, you're free to talk. You'll have to unmute yourself.
All right, sorry. I touched a button and everything went away. So I posted my question in the Q&A, but wanted to ask, maybe it would be easier for me to ask, does a farm stand have to be a independent separate structure, or can customers use a portion of an existing structure like a garage or a shed or a barn as if you set up a space on or next to that as a place where they can purchase items? Does that count as a farm stand, or does it need to be a separate structure?
No, it can be incorporated into another structure. You just need to be careful when you do so about how that impacts building code requirements, So a barn converted to allow some retail operation, if it gets too big or allows the public in, it could affect the design of that building itself and what the building department looks at. So, but sure, you can use another part of the building.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I see that there's nobody else's hands up, and we've gone through at least half of you. I do want to acknowledge just for a moment, folks, that Commissioner Kafalis has joined us and has been listening in. So just wanted you to know that your elected officials are observing these things. We do video these things so that they can watch them and that they can keep up to speed with what's being discussed and are hearing what you all have to say. So thank you, Commissioner Kafalis, for joining us. If nobody else wants to speak, I'm sure that you guys have things that you would rather be doing, maybe out working with your crops or maybe selling something. I think that we will go ahead and end tonight's meeting. And I thank you for coming on. If you have the need to provide us with written comments as we put things out on the webpage, feel free to email me or Jen or Leslie. We would love to hear from you. Give us your suggestions and we will do what we can to incorporate those into our code. And with that, I'll let you guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wrap.